Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Array Methods 8 for part 4 of Module 1. And let's see, we've got remove element and keep, and then compute average of numbers. Compute average of numbers is a little different, so we'll do that on its own. But remove element and keep, we're going to start messing with splice inside of an iteration. Now, one of the things that we need to note is when you use splice inside of an iteration, you have to be very careful about exactly how you're using splice, so we'll go over that in a moment. So the first thing we want to identify is that, okay, so given an array of elements and a discarder parameter, remove element returns an array containing the items in the given array that do not match the discarder parameter. So if an empty array is passed in, it should return an empty array. If all the elements match, it should return an empty array. Okay, so first thing we could do is probably check to see if it's an empty array and then just return that empty array. I would prefer that if we operate on the input array, rather than creating a new array, we don't need to worry about either of the nodes. So one option is that we iterate over the array, create a new array before that, push elements to it provided that they don't equal the discarder. And something very similar for keep, basically creating a new array. But if we want to get fancy and we want to use splice, which we do, we're going to do it all in one place and return the input array. So iterate over the input array if current element matches, let's say, equals the discarder, delete current element. Now there's one extra thing that we need to do here. And what we do is if we use splice to delete one element, you want to consider that what's happening to the length is that the length is now one shorter than it was. And so what's going to happen is, let's say that we're iterating. So we're iterating over here, and I is equal to 0. It's not equal to the discarder, so we increment I to be equal to 1, and we check this element. This is equal to 2, so we delete it. The resulting array now has 4 elements, because this one won't be here. 3, after we do the deletion, is going to be at index 1. However, unless we adjust I during the for loop, I is going to go to index 2, meaning that it'll actually skip this 3 value. So we want to make sure that we, what's the opposite of increment? Decrement index variable. So let's put this into practice. For variable I is equal to 0, I is less than the array dot length, I is going to increment by 1 each time. Let's check to see if the current array element, array at I, is equal to discarder. If it is, we want to delete the current element. We delete the current element by saying array.splice, the index where we want to start cutting, I, and the number that we want to delete as the second argument, which is 1. Now at this point is where we need to make sure that I gets reset, because it's about to get incremented, because the for loop ends. So what we want to make sure that I basically visits what it is here again, because the resulting array is going to have been changed. So we're getting rid of that element, meaning that we need to reassign I to be whatever it was before this iteration, so that afterwards, when it gets incremented, it's operating properly. So we basically just say I minus minus. And then I think they want us to return the input array, so we'll say return array, run our tests, and we're good. I'm just leaving that up there for a moment. Let's talk about the next one. This is the exact same problem, just the opposite. So let's just jump right into it. For variable I is equal to 0, I is less than array dot length, I plus plus. So for this one, rather than if the current element is equal to discarder, we want to make sure that if the current element is not equal to keeper. If the current element is not equal to keeper, then we want to get rid of it. So we splice the array at the index that we're currently iterating at, and we're going to delete one value. And then we're going to make sure that I is reassigned to whatever it was minus 1. After all of that, we're going to return the input array. So iterating, check to make sure it's not equal to the keeper. If it's not equal to the keeper, we don't want to keep it. So we splice the array at that index, deleting one value, and then reassign I so that it can, Well, let's just show that real quick. I'm not sure that my verbal explanation is enough, so let's put this array here. So we're iterating over it, and let's say that this is the one for remove. So we see 1, we keep it, we see 2, we're going to remove it. So what happens is that when we do splice, the resulting array looks like this. But after this value, let's say we spliced here and didn't readjust I, the next value it's going to look at is going to be this one. So it's going to have skipped 3. If we reassign I, each time that we splice, we account for the fact that we splice and we'll be able to view all of the elements. So there you go. Let's run our tests and we're in good shape. So compute average of numbers. I believe that we've done something similar to this. Computing an average is relatively simple. We're going to iterate over the nums array. First we need create a sum variable. Iterate over the nums array. Set sum to be sum plus current num. After we do all of that, nums, or we should say sum, will contain a sum of all the numbers, at which point we should return sum divided by length of input nums. Average is just all of the numbers added up divided by how many numbers there are. If we have them in an array, the length gives us an easy way to identify how many numbers we just added up. So variable sum is equal to 0. Return sum divided by nums.length. Iterate over the nums array. Going to use a for loop. Maybe thinking like, hey, don't you want to use something a little bit more complicated like for each or anything else? No, I don't. I want to make sure that I am so good at for loops that on the interview I can make sure that for loop will do anything that I need it to do, regardless of what the for loop actually has to accomplish. I'll iterate by more than one variable. I can start iterating at a certain point. Once I get done the interview, then I get into the whole world of higher order functions and all that fun. So yes, it is necessary to write these for loops. It's going to be a lot more fun during the interview if you write this without barely thinking. It'll let you talk about it. It'll be nice and relaxing because it's like, oh, hey, I know how to do this. So set sum to be sum plus current number. So sum plus equals nums at I. Sum has now been, we've accumulated essentially all of our numbers into a sum variable. And then we're going to return sum divided by nums.length. Oh no! Expected not a number to deeply equal 0. Oh boy. If given an empty array, it should return 0. Let's go ahead and see if we can't sort out that edge case. Although to be sure, okay, so what's going to happen there is that if nums.length is 0, we're going to have 0 divided by 0, which of course is going to give us, I think, not a number, which is why we have an error there. So the first thing we're going to need to adjust about this is we'll say if nums.length is equal to 0. Let's look at the error real quick. Expected, so there's an X next to it should return 0 if given an empty array. So that identifies the test that failed, meaning that this function that I wrote previously was given an empty array and it gave me not a number. And it's basically saying like, hey, 2 deeply equals 0, that's a reference to say that what they want is 0. What we gave them was not a number. And deeply equal, you don't want to really worry too much about what deeply equal means. It's on the same order of triple equals versus double equals, but obviously it is a little deeper. Get it? Deeper? Essentially, if you're comparing objects, you need to recursively check the object to make sure that all of the nested objects inside of an object are equal to each other. It's also just easier to make everything deeply equal when it comes to writing tests for these kind of problems. So if the length of the nums array input is 0, we'll just return 0. We'll have an edge case up here, meaning that this one should now sort itself out. And it does. So thanks for watching, excellent work, and we'll see you in the next video.